Cindy Stumpo has been building houses and shattering stereotypes.
Big stuff, big problem. I get eyes all around my head. I'm not going to miss a trick.
You have to love this business all the time.
Cindy Stumpo is tough as nails.
And welcome to Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio 1030. I am in the studio tonight with my daughter Samantha.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Sammy. And tonight's show, we're talking about people. You need to feel safe in your home. Your home is supposed to be your safe haven. As a builder, I am building safe homes. In the state of Massachusetts, 1 in every 3 women are stalked or raped or abused in their lifetime. 1 in every 5 men the same. My guest tonight is Tony Troop from Jane Doe, Inc. Tony, what is Jane Doe, Inc.? Please explain.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show with you. It's just so impressive that you were willing to give the time to such an important issue that's affecting all of us. You know, Jane Doe Inc. is the statewide advocacy coalition against sexual assault and domestic violence. We're a social justice organization that really looks at the intersections of violence and other forms of oppression like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, and so on. These are issues that affect people every single day, and our job as the coalition is to support our 56 member programs all across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, so that they can be there for individuals who need help when they've experienced abuse, either currently or sometime in their past, and also to try to work to prevent such violence from happening in the future.
You know, you're going to have to bear along with me here because I had put a post on my social media, and it was a small post just asking if anybody wanted to come on and discuss about their situation. Private message me. And I figured, okay, I'll get 4 or 5 people. We're up over 110 people. And I'm sitting back and I'm reading these stories and my heart's breaking. And this is at midnight last night and 1 in the morning and then 6 o'clock this morning. And then some people got into their stories. And I'm saying, what do I live in a bubble? I know it exists. But I also know that my personality, I'm trying to put myself in their situation and saying, how, why, if somebody did this to me, if I was a young girl, wouldn't have I think, knowing my personality, I definitely would have marched to my father's arms and I knew I was protected. So I think, knowing Cindy Stumpo, I would have gone for help. I don't think I would have been embarrassed, but remember the words I'm using. I don't think.
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know. Mm-hmm. You heard me ask my daughter prior to us starting up. I asked my daughter, Sammy, if a man put his hands on you, would you know to come to me? Maybe today she would because I'm young enough to handle a situation. Maybe in 10 years from now, when I'm older, she might feel like I don't want to bother my mother with that.
No, I think my whole life you've always had an open mic conversation with me, Chad, and Dad about everything that I never feared having to tell you anything. No matter how bad it was.
Absolutely, right? You know, that is something that we can instill in our children and our friends and our family members so that they know prior to something happening that they'll be believed and supported, so that it will make it easier for somebody to come forward. But here's the sad reality. Abusers are master manipulators. And so who you think you are today is not who you are once you've been a victim of abuse. And I'm sure in many of the stories that you heard from people, they themselves were surprised to find themselves in this situation, not feeling like they could speak out or reach out to somebody. Because what bettors and people who abuse do is they are masters of control. And they isolate, they intimidate, they threaten, and all of those things can really create barriers for victims to come forward. So you're right, Cindy, to say, I think I would. That shows such a great level of empathy and sympathy and understanding of how quickly somebody's situation can change and what they feel about their options. So I'm so glad we're going to talk today about what we can do to help make sure that those options stay open for people.
Bingo. And again, I use the words, I think, with sincerity, because I think we all live in glass houses, and we don't know. It could be one of our children that's the next victim. It could be me. It could be somebody, it could be my mom and dad are getting older. All of a sudden, there becomes abuse that way. There's so much to touch upon, but I'm not the person that's saying, no, never me. I just want to make sure we maybe going forward can teach proper tools. Like me saying to my daughter, I don't care how bad it ever gets in your life. You need to come to me. You need to go to your dad. You need to come to one of us. And I think going forward, we can start brainwashing, and that's the word to use, to the next generation, if it's all possible. I don't even know.
It is so possible. One of the questions that you and I were going back and forth about was, what do you wish people would ask? And one question is, how early should we start talking to people, talking to our kids about these issues?
Right.
There's age-appropriate language that we can use. You're not going to sit down with your child and start talking about battery and rape, when they're 3. But what you can talk to them about is boundaries, privacy, consent, things like, grandpa's coming over, or my neighbor's coming over, or the coach is, after the game. You don't have to, if they say, oh, honey, come give me a hug, go give them a hug. If the child doesn't feel comfortable, the best thing a parent can do is to say, only if you're comfortable, right? Let people know to set those boundaries early, that their body is their own, that their sense of identity and autonomy is their own. So there's many age-appropriate ways that we can teach those lessons, right? Both about that, as well as how we treat other people with respect.
I think I've been telling that to Samantha. How long, Sammy?
How old are you, dear?
I'm 30. Since I could walk and talk, you've always said to me to be careful of your surroundings. Always, no one's ever allowed to touch you. Make sure you tell me, don't go in cars with strangers. My whole life you did that.
I think, that's going all the way through. I still do it now. But when she was probably 5 or 6, I probably started with, okay, these are your private areas. And yeah, I went back as far as I can remember, as my grandmother did with me. Not my mother, by the way. Yes. My grandmother.
And I'm hoping, and it sounds like just, a little bit that I've gotten to know Sam today, is that it's not in a way that's about fear, because the fear, if you address these issues from that perspective, it can really shut people down. We try to stay on the positive side. Yes, we need to talk about safety. I'm not saying we dismiss or minimize the reality of, abuse or child sexual abuse or whatnot. But we also need to focus on the positive side so that somebody has that strength, that inner strength, and from a healthy perspective about what a relationship looks like, what consent means.
I have so many questions here, Tony, so I'm going to jump.
Sure.
I listed them, but I'm going to jump here. Who is impacted besides the abused and the abuser in a family? Other people get impacted in that family.
Domestic violence and sexual violence impacts not only the person who's experiencing the abuse, but everybody around them. It could be their children, their family, their friends, their coworkers. Whether it's a child who, is seeing this at home and then is having a difficult time focusing when they're at school, or it's a coworker who's wondering why their, colleague isn't showing up day after day. So we can talk more about this because it's a really important question.
I'm just telling you, Tony, be prepared to come back into the studio next weekend because we're not going to cover it all. I can just tell you we're just not going to cover it all. And my next question is different types of forms of abuse. But I'm Cindy Stumpo, and this is Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio 1030. We all want to say, my son the doctor, my daughter the lawyer. Guess what? That's great and wonderful. But I got to be honest, when my parents say, my daughter the general contractor, Cindy Stumpo, it's really cool. Let your kids pick their own path. Be there to guide them. Be there to support them. Welcome back to Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio 1030. Samantha Stumpo and I are speaking with Tony Troop from Jane Doe, Inc. They help with abused women and men out there. Please, folks, listen to Jane. Please. Okay, Jane, let's go back. Are there different types?
Listen to Tony.
I'm sorry.
We get that all the time.
She's Jane, she's Tony.
Doe.
Listen,
Great. I love it.
You guys got to give me a break out here. One, okay, this is a very sensitive subject.
It is.
And two, I'm a woman in a female. I'm a female in a male-dominated field. Mm-hmm. And to even think that I have all these guys working for me, and what they, one out of every so many, and whatever. This is a big conversation, guys. Are there different forms of abuse, Tony?
When we want to talk to people about domestic violence, the first thing that comes to their mind is the black eye, right? People think, oh, they're getting beaten up, it's the physical violence. And that certainly is a form of domestic violence. But at its root, it's really about the abuse of power and control of one person over another to try to influence and really control their behaviors, their attitudes, and their actions. And so the types of abuse that can be used to create that result include physical, emotional, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, like, playing mind games with people, verbal abuse, constantly putting them down in front of other people, making them feel, stupid or, insecure, doubting their own judgment. It can also be sexual abuse, forcing a partner to engage in sexual activity when they don't want to. Let's not forget, it wasn't until the 1970s that marital rape was illegal in most parts of the country.
Right, I read about that.
Yeah. And also financial abuse, not allowing people not only to control their own income, but have access to the family income, make decisions about how their money is spent.
There are so many forms of abuse, but I can tell you something. Somebody taking their fist and putting it in my face, I think that would set the tone for severe fear. Severe. You want to emotionally abuse me? Look, we can get down to a husband cheating on his wife is emotional abuse. There's many forms. But there are women that are afraid to go home. Home is supposed to be your safe haven. Home is supposed to be where you're supposed to walk in that door and put all the pressure behind you and come into a warm, loving environment, whether you're a child, a teenager, a married woman, a married man, a same-sex couple. I don't care. Homes, I feel, as a builder, is supposed to be a place where you just walk in and go, I'm closing the door and the day's behind me. We've got women walking in their homes and don't know if they're going to get sucker punched, right hooked, kicked in the ribs. And like I said, the stories I'm reading, I was up all night reading them, and I have bags under my eyes today. I was watching a Lifetime movie on my social media. I was reading
real life stories, right?
And so I can take the emotional abuse. If I have to deal with anything, I can take emotional abuse. I think we all, as women, take some sort of emotional abuse. But I cringe. The hair standing up to think that somebody could full fist punch me that's twice my size, twice my strength, and I can't fight you back.
We hear different stories because not everybody's experience is the same, and their experiences are the same for many different reasons. They're not the same person. The person who's abusing them might have different skills at their disposal, right? So a physically weak man might be more successful using emotional abuse, right, or financial abuse, but not necessarily. A strong woman might use her strength against an emotionally weak man, right? So people use the tactics that they know are going to be the most effective.
Okay, so we can all be a little abusive in our marriages. Emotionally, we say things that we don't really mean. We fight. I don't think that's,
and you're right.
abuse.
That is not abuse.
Okay.
It is so important. I'm so glad you brought this up because we must distinguish between disputes. I can't say the word. Disputes, disagreements. Fighting, discord from abuse. I fight with my partner. Of course we do.
Right.
Sometimes we bicker. Sometimes we fight. But it's never done in order to control the other person. We have a disagreement. We might get angry. We're frustrated. It might push our buttons. But there's a level of respect that is underlying our ability to have that disagreement.
Right. And I agree with that. So we have to really, we can't cross the line on every little thing. But
absolutely,
I do notice that I've heard this through a lot of men, and I don't understand the saying. And maybe you can help me out.
Sure.
And I'll use using my name as an example. But Cindy, you made me say that to you. But Cindy, you made me do that. But Cindy, when a guy says, you made me do that, what does that mean to me? Because that sends a chill up my spine. I made you? Are you kidding me? I made you. Okay, what does that mean when somebody says, you made me do that?
It is one of the biggest red flags, okay? There are real warning signs when it comes to domestic violence, and we urge people to go to our website, to go look online, to get resources, to become familiar with them, not only for themselves, but maybe for a friend or a colleague or a teacher or somebody that they know, right? To say, wait a minute, that's not just a disagreement. That's just not somebody bickering. There's something more serious going on here. And one of the red flags is, as I said, about the put downs, right?
And you made me.
You made me, because that's about lack of accountability. What they always will deflect. You know, it's kind of the target and deflect theory. It's like, oh, not my mistake, it's your mistake. That is something we hear often from survivors, that was told to them. And at a certain point,
We should
you
have buttons
start to
that
believe
say,
it.
you made me. No, you made
No,
you.
you made you.
Okay?
Exactly.
Not me.
Take responsibility. Absolutely.
So that's one of the, I would say that's a catch, you know, that when a man, a husband, a boyfriend says that to you, you better take a step back and really think of those lines, that one sentence, you made me do that.
You made me
okay?
do that. And it crosses all boundaries. And we see this, you know, in all different backgrounds. And again, it's what we can teach both young women and young men, you know, what it means to be in a positive, healthy relationship is taking responsibility. That might be coming out of a place of embarrassment. It's like, oh, I don't want other people to think that I was responsible for that, so I'm going to put that on you. People need to own up
And
to
man
their
up.
own actions.
Own up and man up, I would say. But I also want to talk about, you know, everybody thinks this is, you know, only touches families in poor neighborhoods. Tony, please let the listeners know it doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire or you are living in a homeless shelter. Please explain this, that it doesn't strike. It's not about social
Standards. Yeah.
your statues. It
Exactly.
doesn't. It has no. It affects every color, every
Sure.
race. I don't care. Please explain that to my listeners.
You know, in thinking about the show, there was a phrase that came to mind that I think you've probably heard in the context of building, and that your listeners are probably familiar with, which is NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. People
I've never heard that,
Never
but
heard this.
NIMBY?
It's like, oh, don't build that, you know, detox center in my backyard.
Okay, got
don't
it.
build that, you know, halfway house in my neighborhood. Well, it's a similar concept when it comes to domestic and sexual violence. That can't possibly happen in my backyard, right? It's not happening in my community. We have to recognize that these are issues that affect all of us, regardless of socioeconomic status. So how much money people make, what education they had, what profession they're in, what their sexual orientation or gender identity is. Sadly, the first domestic violence homicide in Massachusetts this year was of a transgender woman who had been a leading activist in that field for many years, and it was just heartbreaking to see Christine's life be taken. You know, 90% of the domestic violence abusers who are identified are women, but still, you know, we know that a lot of that is because a lot of men face a lot of barriers to step forward
again,
because they're embarrassed.
Rich, poor, middle
Rich,
class.
poor, middle class. Absolutely.
There's no rhyme or reason.
Nope. And, well, you're right. I mean, it doesn't discriminate.
Okay.
Right? No one's immune. No one is immune from this issue, and no one is immune from being part of the solution either.
Okay, so we've established that, ladies, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're millionaires or you're poor or you're middle class. We can all walk into these relationships, and some of us don't even know that we're walking into them until we're in them. But my next question will be coming up with Tony is, tell me, why do women stay in these abusive relationships? But like always, we do have to go out to a break. But real fast, tell me why women do stay in abusive relationships. And I'm going to cut you to a break, but I'm using up every second I
You
can.
got it. So we can talk about why victims of domestic violence stay, but I think it's also important that we talk about, why does somebody abuse? We can't have one part of the conversation without the other to
Okay.
really understand what the dynamic is.
Okay, Samantha and I are talking to Tony Troop from JaneDoe.Inc. You need to feel safe in your home. Again, your home should be your safe haven.
You don't own me. Don't tie me down, 'cause I'll never stay.
And welcome back. I'm Cindy Stumpo. You're listening to Tough as Nails on WBZ 1030 News Radio. That was just a great song. Thank you, buddy. We are talking to Tony Troop from JaneDoe.org. Jane Doe.
Jane Doe Inc.
Inc.
The website is janedoe.org.
Okay. So, Jane, what is the website? So we just have it.
Tony.
I'm sorry. See, here we go again. Tony, what is the site again? Let's get it correct.
So our organization's name is Jane Doe Inc., and
Yeah.
you can find us at janedoe.org.
Okay, good. Now back to the question that we started with. And that was what? What was my last question? I was
Why?
asking, right.
Why does this happen? Why do people stay in abusive relationships?
Correct.
And these are really two sides of the same coin, right? We need to, yes, understand how abusers are so manipulative, how they control people's decisions, limit their options, isolate them from family and friends, control their finances.
So can I
and
stop
all
you
of
right
those
there?
things, yeah.
So the abuser, and I've known one relationship that was close to me. He was removing her friends one by one and pulling away from her family, and she was allowing. So what is that? So she doesn't go and get help? What is the controlling of that behavior?
Right. So that is the control. And I think it's understanding that it's not that the person's allowing this to happen, it's that their options are systematically being taken away from them. Their resolve, their reserve, their strength to be able to make different choices has been so diminished that somebody who otherwise you think might have just said, "Not me, buddy," and gotten up and taken their stuff and walked away, over time has less inner strength to be able to do that. And we hear from people
So by
who,
taking away the woman's friends and sisters and family,
and saying things like, "They'll never believe you. Why will they believe you? They know you're such a klutz. They know you're such a ditz. They know that you can't, manage the finances. They understand how that sort of psychological manipulation, you start to believe it. And then, there was one of our member programs had a phrase that said, "Domestic violence, it'll make you crazy," because the reality is, yes, there are people who have mental health issues who are both abusers and victims, but it is the experience of it. You start to question everything about yourself and how you ended up here and what you can do about it.
what I've learned a little bit last night is that all these men start off as like these really gem of a man, and then what are they all Geminis? Like different personalities come out, the evil and the good, the Gemini personality trait. But what is there something that we can look for? Because the few women that I did speak with up until all hours of the night last night, they all said the same thing. He was awesome. He was great. Right. He was good to my family. He was good to me.
Sure.
He was a gentleman. Everybody loves him.
Right. When we see stuff in a paper like, "Oh, he was such a nice guy.
Church-going good guy."
Right. And, his lawn was always so neat. And I just would say, wow, to me, that's the sign. Because, if we often do this exercise where people go in to do trainings with either police officers or healthcare providers or, coworkers to say, "Okay, everybody just take your wallet out and put it on top of the table." And people will be like looking around like, "Wait a minute, what?" It's like, really, you don't have to worry. I'm not going to do anything. Just put your wallet on the table. And then slowly but surely, you start to take next steps. So on the one hand, the abuser is starting to set some, pattern, starting to create that dynamic of, "Well, you can trust me just a little bit more," and pushes it a little bit more and a little bit more until you're isolated, you don't have access to your friends and family, you start to not believe yourself, you're feeling bad about yourself, the physical abuse. Sometimes it's the first thing, and that they only have to hit you once because that level of violence is always there under the surface. And other people will tell you that the physical violence didn't happen until much later. So again, there's not a universal story about when and how, but
So
what
there's
is
not a
universal
pattern.
is that there's a pattern.
Oh, there is a pattern.
The pattern isn't, that it goes in a certain order. but the pattern is about abusive and controlling behaviors. And it's really important that we broaden our definition and understanding about what that abuse looks like, that it's not only physical.
It's not only physical.
Because then we miss the signs. And we miss the signs for ourselves. We also miss the signs for our friends and coworkers, who we're the ones. What we know is that victims are often in the least able to help themselves in a situation because they are so isolated, because they have been so battered. Now, many of them have so much resolve.
But Tony, how does the mother, like if somebody's trying to pull my daughter away from me, I'm going to fight to want to still be, no matter how much she pushes me or she gets into a relationship with a man that's trying to push me out, I'm going to push back. I want to see my daughter. Or do you just get to a point where you go, okay, she doesn't want any part of me, so I'm not going to push to be in her life?
It's really hard. We know it's so hard for family members and friends to just keep at it when they feel like I've been trying to help and they're not responding. And we want people to know that the domestic violence and sexual violence hotlines are free and confidential. They're available 24 hours a day. People can go to janedoe.org to get the local name and phone numbers for the programs in their areas and call not only for themselves if they need help, but also for a friend. If you're a friend or a family member that's concerned and you feel like you've done everything and you just don't know what else to do, like the scenario you're describing, we'd urge people to reach out and call to talk about what are those options.
But
how do you stay non-judgmental? How do you stay supportive?
Can I stop you right there for a minute, Tony? And this is just being in business, and I have a lot of common sense, okay? We'll just leave it at that. But there are websites that you can download. I'll give you one, webwatcher.com. And in 5 minutes, I take your device, your phone, your laptop, your iPad, your computer, and I will know within 5 minutes it's going to take me to download this. So you turn your back and you go take a shower, I've downloaded everything I need. Now I can sit on my device anywhere in the world. I don't have to be in the same city as you.
Right.
We could be in 2 different states. And I can see everything you text. I can see everything you look at.
Right, it's scary, isn't it?
Every email you write. Everything. The only thing I can't see is what you might be talking to over the phone. But you think now, ladies, that you pick up your phone and you put janedoe.org, janedoe.inc, whatever, and somebody's watching you on the other end.
Yeah.
So my advice to women that are in dangerous situations, and I don't know if you want to agree with me or not, don't use your own devices electronically. Either call, and again, those numbers show up on cell phone records, so depending on how much of a control freak.
Sure.
Or go to a public place and use a public device.
I'm so glad you brought this up. The issue of technology and safety is something that, as technology has expanded so dramatically and changed so drastically over the last 10 years, we keep trying to stay ahead of it as well. There are certainly ways that abusers are using technology to track and focus, and it might be to hurt somebody's credit, or to track who they're talking to. So we certainly ask people to talk to an advocate who can work with them to make sure that they can determine if their devices have been tagged in any way.
The problem is you don't know.
And
I don't care who searches them. You don't know.
Exactly. So using a safe device, either a friend's or a family, or you're doing some of the stuff at work, talking to your employer if that's a safe place to say, I have the situation. Is there a secure computer that I can use to go get some information I need? Going to the public library, changing your passwords regularly, all of those kind of tech safety issues. One of our national partners is the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And if people go to techsafety.org, again, that's just techsafety.org, you can find a host of information and resources, as well as ideas about what you can do, because technology can also be really helpful. A lot of programs are using online chat rooms and other ways to reach people who are otherwise.
And again, if you go on that group, that chat line, and your phone's being monitored, and nobody will be able to tell that phone's being monitored, please, people, believe me, I know what I'm talking about here, okay? If that device has been downloaded in your phone, you are not safe from a person seeing what you're doing, what you're chatting about.
Right. So again,
so go buy a disposable. Can you buy a disposable?
People can use disposables lots of ways, but mostly call a domestic violence advocate It's free and confidential to call and get services, to get advice and resources so that you can not only know how to use technology safely, but also what other options might be available to you. People, I know that you heard from a lot of people, Cindy, and there are a lot more people out there who are isolated,
devastated.
and we really urge them to reach out and talk to somebody because it can really save somebody's life.
Okay. Up next, we have so many callers in the box, and we can only take 2 callers, all right? We have 10 minutes, so we're going to bring it down to 2 callers. You're listening to Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio 1030. We'll be right back after this break. We all want to say, my son the doctor, my daughter the lawyer. Guess what? That's great and wonderful. But I got to be honest, when my parents say, my daughter the general contractor, Cindy Stumpo, it's really cool. Let your kids pick their own path. Be there to guide them. Be there to support them. Welcome back. I'm Cindy Stumpo, and this is Tough as Nails on WBZ 1030 News Radio. People, you need to feel safe in your home. Samantha, let's bring in only two brave callers tonight.
Okay. Well, the first caller, Donna, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hey, Donna, this is Cindy. How are you?
Good, honey. How are you?
I'm good. I'm going to pass the mic, and Tony's going to play host now because this is her game.
Okay.
This is not mine. Mm-hmm. This is her knowledge. This is her
we're
expertise.
We're all in this together. So, Donna, thank you so much for calling in. I understand you responded to Cindy's comment last night on social media asking people if they wanted to share their stories. And we so appreciate, what you can bring because, as a movement that's led by survivors, and we are really still very much of the belief that we need to listen to survivors to help us know what's needed, what we can do, what would have made a difference in your life. So I'll turn it to you.
Okay, this happened 30 years ago, so it's not a new current thing, but it's still pretty new when you start to talk about it. Probably the best thing you can do is let somebody know what you're going through, which I did not, and I went through this for a good 6, 7, maybe 8 years. On the outside, it was the perfect marriage, the biggest house in Wellesley, and the best of the cars, and the best of the jewelry, and the best of everything, the best stuff you could have. But behind the closed doors, it was the hitting and the verbal abuse. It started out as verbal, and it ended up into physical. And I still have a broken nose, and I still have 2 displaced fractures, which you'll never hear properly. So, and I never told anybody. It was embarrassing. It was something you don't want to discuss.
And when Dawn and I were talking last night on the phone, she said, Cindy, I come from very deep Italian roots.
I do.
My parents weren't like this.
No, Italian Catholic family, grew up in Belmont. No, never ever saw this. Heard of it, but not in my house. It never happened. And my ex-husband came from a very affluent town in Massachusetts, and there was verbal abuse going on, but between his parents, but I never thought anything about it.
So here's this good Italian girl, and she thinks she marries this really awesome Jewish guy, and she, by the way, converted. She told me,
she converted
to Judaism.
I converted for him, sure. Yeah, I converted for him. So it doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter what you do for work. I do accounting. I'm a bankruptcy accountant. It doesn't matter what you do. It can happen anywhere to anybody, and it's devastating, and mentally and physically, it just totally rips you apart, and your self-esteem is...
And so how did you, thank you for sharing this. It really shows a lot of bravery on your part. And, you talked about encouraging people to reach out. I think some people still don't understand why it's so difficult to do that. So I wonder if you can talk for just a minute about, what was that barrier for you to actually reach out to your family or your friends? And then also, ultimately, what helped you make that change?
I think it was difficult. I was embarrassed. My parents adored him. My friends adored him on the outside. He was the kindest, nicest, most generous, giving, handsome, dressed well. There was nothing about him that would say
I'm a hitter.
Abuser. Exactly, nothing. So it was embarrassing. And lots of times I think I was afraid that people would say, oh, he probably just had a bad day, maybe, which is what I was doing. I must have said something. I must have done something to set him off. Exactly, blaming it on myself, always myself. And how I finally got out of it was after so many hittings. There was one instance in the kitchen where I was up against the kitchen wall, as usual, in my face, sneering, and I was at the point where I just said, you know what, I'm done. I can't. Just go ahead, do it. Go ahead, hit me. Take your best shot, but you better hope I don't get up, because if I get up, you're dead. I will kill you. So go ahead, just do it. I just can't fight this anymore. And he just walked away.
Right. You know, we hear this story.
Now, he walked away. Why? Because she took control back?
Exactly. Yeah, I think he walked away because I wasn't cowering. I wasn't scared. I wasn't, don't do it. Don't hit me. I'm sorry. I was just, go ahead, knock yourself out. Go ahead, hit me.
Right. And on the one hand, right, this worked out well for you. We also know that, that it can go the other way. And so what we really urge people to do is talk to a trained domestic violence advocate. You can call the hotlines 24 hours a day, free and confidential, to come up with a safety plan. Because what we know is when someone's going to leave is when they're actually at most risk of being either further hurt or murdered, because that is when you are challenging the abuser, and they're all about control, and you're taking their control away from them. So we're so glad that it worked out for you.
Absolutely.
And what we'd really urge is for people to, recognize, the signs so that they don't minimize and leave themselves at greater risk. Reach out and talk to somebody who can help you with some safety planning.
And Donna, since you got out of this, and we talked last night, and we had a private conversation.
Right.
You might be able to donate some of your time to Jane Doe and help out.
Yeah, I
a
was
little
just going to say that feel free to give my number to people that don't want to go to professionals because, for whatever reason, because maybe they've never been through it, or maybe it's just because, they just want me to pay them, for whatever reason.
Right.
But
it's networking.
It's networking. I think, as I said, we're a movement that was started by and for survivors, and still today that sort of peer support is so important. There are more volunteers who work with domestic violence programs than the staff. Like, the staff alone couldn't do this. We rely on volunteers like you who go in and help run support groups, provide training, answer the hotlines, and talk to people. So if you want to get involved, if other people want to get involved, we'd urge them to call a local program, participate through their volunteer training, and give of your time and resource.
And Donna, I got even one better one. You're on my Facebook. You're on my social media.
I am.
So I can just send two of my biggest framers over there, and we can just dangle the guy from the roof and maybe just drop him on his head a bit.
Exactly.
After last night, I want to do a lot of that right now.
Yeah,
okay?
I know that retaliation theme is really compelling, and yet we know we really don't want people to put themselves in danger either.
Okay, no street justice.
Street justice. But prevention and public justice, social justice, accountability, I'm there with you. We have to do better. And we can do better.
Donna. Thank you so much for calling.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day. Speak to you soon.
Bye, honey.
My name is Luca. I live on the second floor.
I'm Cindy Stumpo, and this is Tough as Nails on WBZ 1030 News Radio. Not feeling so tough tonight, by the way, Tony. Samantha, you have a caller?
We do. Susan, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
We want to hear your story.
Okay, so I just want to give you my name. My full name is Susan Luongo, and my story is different in the sense that the domestic violence that I came across was when I was 5 years old. I remember being 5 years old to this day. I'm 52. I can tell you exactly what I was wearing when it
Susan,
happened.
I want you to go slowly, and I want you to breathe.
Okay.
I want your shoulders down a little bit, okay?
Yeah.
We're right here. We're right here. I just want you to go, just breathe,
Sure.
okay? Good.
Yeah, sure. So I was 5 years old, and I remember hearing all this commotion and screaming and things like that. And I come out from the bedroom, of which I shared with my three other siblings, and I saw my mother standing there wrapped in gauze around her head, with some blood stains, and my father was standing near her, and in walks a police officer. And at the time, it was 1970, and I also noticed that my aunt and my cousin who lived upstairs had come downstairs too. And the police officer saw me peering around the corner, and I came around because I felt safe seeing him there. And he came over to me and he said, "Who did this to your mother?" And I said, "He did." And I pointed to my father. And looking back, I think, wow, like I knew then, I probably even knew even before then that this was happening. And that domestic violence, that abuse, he was physically and emotionally abusive. He was an alcoholic, but it happened throughout my life. I remember one time I was 9 years old. He threw me to the ground for, I don't know, God knows, for some reason he was angry about something. It was kicking me. He was in construction. It was kicking me with his construction boots and pulling at my hair. And I was screaming. And I was saying, "Please stop." And it was really bad.
And this was your dad? This was your
dad? My father. And, I was so frightened. And I even urinated in myself because I was so afraid that he might kill me. And the abuse continued, not only towards me, but my mother. He would beat us every single day. We were beaten every day. My mother, my siblings. And I remember growing up like I wasn't going to live my mother's life. What I did was I put myself through school. So despite all my advanced degrees, which I have 4 of them, and despite the businesses I run, there's still a part of me that always thinks I'm not good enough because that does so much to your self-esteem. And, the last thing for me was, well, actually, let me go back. I remember going to high school. I was a junior in high school, and I had opened the door, and he was mad about something. He punched me right in the eye, and I went to school with a black eye, and not a teacher asked me what happened. No one. And I remember thinking, this is insane. Like, I'm just a kid, and no one cares, and the shame and the guilt that comes with that abuse is just so tremendous. And also, when I was, the last time if he ever put his hands on me, I was 23 years old, and I was sleeping. And at the time, it was just me and my youngest brother living at home. And I hear my mother screaming at the top of her lungs, and he was beating her. And I come on in my bedroom, and I was trying to separate them. My brother was doing the same thing. And my mother turns around and says, "Stop, leave him alone," meaning my father. And I was thinking, oh, my God, you're so sick. Like, this is insane. Like, he's beating you, and we're trying to stop this. And I ran out of my house just in time as I was coming down my stairwell. He picked up this nightstand that was in the hallway, and he threw it down at me. And I swear to you, I don't know if it was the guardian angel, whoever it was, I felt this tap behind my back, pushed me out of the way. I literally leaped out of the way a couple of steps, and this thing came crashing down. And thank God it happened the way it did, because I would not be here today telling my story. I'd probably be paraplegic or dead or something. And that was the last time he ever put his hands on me. He's since passed. He died in 1993. But this is the craziest. This is even crazier. After that experience, I was with someone. I got involved with someone who beat me, not once but twice. And I was involved with that individual for 4 years. And he beat me the second time on Christmas Eve. After he beat me the first time, like an idiot, I went back thinking, oh, my God, he really loves me. He's so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll never do this to you again, this whole thing. But looking back, I realized, oh, my God, it was such a codependent relationship. And I went back a second time like a fool, and he beat me a second time on Christmas Eve. And when the police came, what happened was he had called my mother. He was high as a kite and everything, called my mother, and my mother could hear me bellowing in the background, and she hung up and she called the police, and thank God she did, because they arrested him and he spent the weekend in jail. And he has since passed too. But, my whole point is that, maybe there's a stigma out there that you think that these abused women are these selfless, women who maybe are not educated or whatever you may think about them. It's not true. That you got to let go of that stigma. It happens across all, income levels and education and all that stuff. So it doesn't matter who you are. It affects us all. And I think, this whole thing with this Me Too movement, we're just scratching the surface. That's sexual harassment, but we live in such a patriarchal society that, this abuse is commonplace all over the world, like different parts of the world. And I came from an immigrant Italian family. My parents met in this country. They met in the north end of Boston. They didn't know each other. But I come to find out, he started abusing her in the relationship, and she stayed with him because her parents disowned her, and she had no one. She had nowhere to go. And he would always threaten my mother. He would always threaten her and say, you leave me, I'll have you killed. I'll take your children away. I'll have you arrested. She had nowhere to go. She didn't know. She wasn't educated. And not to say anything about people who are not.
No.
My point is that she came to this country with nothing. She didn't know any better. You know what I mean? And so she relied on him for everything. And, you know, she's my strongest advocate to this day.
Tony, can I ask Susan a question?
Absolutely.
Because I don't understand something. Susan, I have no words for what you're saying. I'm sitting here in tears in the studio. But I do have a question. You've watched it since you can remember.
Yep.
How does it happen that you watched it, you knew it was wrong, you knew everything, you saw so much, and then you end up in the same place?
You know, Cindy, I don't know. I always swore I wouldn't, because you come from an environment of, this is normal. I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? This is normal. This is the way things are supposed to happen, even though I know part of me that's not the way it's supposed to happen. This is not normal. I gravitated towards someone, I just wanted to be loved. And I found this guy who I thought really loved me. And, like I said, he didn't beat me once. He beat me twice. Shame on me, But I finally left. And actually, it's crazier because even after I left him, he was stalking me and I had to get a restraining order. And then he finally left me alone, But I don't, I wish I had an answer other than to say to you, I don't know, just, it was in my subconscious maybe as a kid that this is normal. And I learned to hide it for so long and the guilt and the shame that comes with that. But I always knew in my heart I would never end up with this guy. And thankfully I did.
Yeah. Susan, thank you so much for sharing your story. And there were so many parts of what you talked about that resonate with me and with the stories we hear from survivors, all the time, which is that, the isolation, the fear, the wanting to be loved, that looking for, connection, and knowing too that it's not shame on you. I just want to say, and I hope that to this day you can look back and say that you made the best choices that you could make at that time, given your experience, right? And given what your options were. So we really want to talk, as we continue, we're going to reflect a little bit more on some of the points that came up in your story. And what we want to know from you really is what would have made a difference. And you've got about 1 minute to tell us what would have made a difference. What message do you want to send to other survivors?
I think what would have made a difference was knowing, hey, there are resources out there for you that you can reach out for help. And there are shelters you can take, and you can get away from your abusers. And you could be living somewhere anonymously so that you're not abused ever again. My mother didn't have those options. It was the 70s. We didn't know any of those things. And I think education, knowledge is power. And the more you find out that there is help there for you, the better off you're going to be. And take your kids and go and get away from your abusers. And let's not forget too, it works the other way around too. Yes, the majority of abusers are males, but there are also a lot of men out there being abused by women.
Absolutely, so, and the same applies in both directions. Thank you so much, Susan, for sharing with us today. It's an inspiration.
Thank you for having me on.
You're a brave girl, honey. You're a brave woman.
Thanks, Cindy.
I
love you,
honey.
Thank you.
Folks, you're listening to Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio 1030. We all want to say, my son the doctor, my daughter the lawyer. Guess what? That's great and wonderful. But I got to be honest, when my parents say, my daughter the general contractor, Cindy Stumpo, it's really cool. Let your kids pick their own path. Be there to guide them. Be there to support them. I'm Cindy Stumpo. This is Tough as Nails on WBZ 1030 News Radio. Samantha, I can't even catch my breath after this one.
So I want to say something before you go into your wrap-up, is that I didn't experience any of these things, and I'm fortunate that that didn't happen to me, and I thank God, everything. After hearing her story, I was crying my eyes out. But we live in a different world, and we're not alone. And everyone out there might think that they're alone, but you're not alone. And you need to remember that there's a ton of people you can come out to and talk to no matter what, and you shouldn't be afraid. You're never alone in this world.
But for some of these women, Tony, they do feel alone, correct?
You know, that feeling of being alone and the silence that often accompanies domestic violence and sexual violence is what allows it to thrive. But Sam, you're so right. You know, this message that people are not alone is a central one to our movement. We want people to know that there's people who care, who understand, who'll be there on the other end of the phone when they call.
And where do they call?
And they can call if they go to janedoe.org and go to Find Help, and then there's a search directory where you can put in your zip code or your city or town and find the local program nearest you. There's also, if anybody's listening from other states, a way to find programs in other states in the country. People can reach out, talk confidentially, get free services to talk about what their options are, find out what resources are there, whether they're looking for legal support, for advocacy support, just for somebody to listen and hear their story.
Tony, one question. We were going to do this in one segment. Will you please come back into the studio next weekend?
Absolutely. We can't talk enough about these issues, and we've got so much more to talk about in terms of prevention and talk to you about even what WBZ is doing.
So, Samantha, thank you very much. Tony, there's no words. I'm so happy that you're coming back next weekend, and I'm so excited. And again, you're listening to Tough as Nails on WBZ News Radio. This is Cindy Stumpo. Good night. Have a safe weekend.